With respect to tertiary education, in previous years, some 200 selected Afghan students benefited from a scholarship program funded by the German government and completed their studies in Iranian universities from the late 1990s to 2006. This was considered one of the most successful assistance programs implemented for Afghans in Iran. I have a table which I can't show you, but looking at overall level of education in the household population, I'll just say that the percentage of women, Afghan women in Iran, in elementary level is lower than men, while it's higher in the senior high school level. In the university-educated group, out of the total of 12 people who are in this particular sample of 165, 8 went to university in Afghanistan and 4 in Iran. So access to university education is very difficult for Afghans in Iran. One of the, with regards to Somalis, one of the questions all respondents were asked was what was their main reason for staying in the camps or in Nairobi. And there were great differences in the answers refugees in the camps gave compared to the answers urban refugees gave. In Dadaab, the two most common answers that people gave was that they stayed there because they had no other option and because of the insecurity in Somalia versus the security the camps provided them with. A small number of people also mentioned education as secondary reason to stay in the camps. More specific questions were also asked on the education offered in the camps, how it compares to the Somali system now and in the past. Almost all respondents agreed that the Kenyan education system is better than the Somali system. They were all very appreciative of the educational system that was available in the camps and the opportunities it would bring them or their children to gain a livelihood in the camps or elsewhere. And an evaluation was carried out by CARE Kenya in the camps that revealed despite initiatives to encourage girls' participation and performance in schools, there are great gender imbalances. I just want to talk briefly about gender, and I want to raise, this is a quote actually by Eileen Pittaway, and it refers to, so this is more in more general terms, gender relations of protracted refugee situations. This refers, in fact, to Rohingya women refugees, and it's actually from a chapter that is located, I believe, in Howard's book. She says, sexual and gender-based violence is endemic in the camps. Women and girls as young as 9 years old are routinely abducted by local villagers and forced into so-called marriages, only to be returned to the camps when they become pregnant. There were reports of young girls and young women being abducted and trafficked into the sex market in nearby Cox's Bazar in Chittagong, and of organized child prostitution within the camp. Women described their fear of going to the latrines and having to collect firewood or green leaves for food in the local forest. There's also another danger that women confront in exile, and that is their invisibility to humanitarian workers, to NGOs and international agencies, due to their gendered position in the community. A lack of gender-sensitive attitudes and skills among many agency workers means that women's presence and needs may be ignored. As feminists, we should be asking, what are the consequences of perceiving women as only dependents and as servants of the men that they are dependent on? Invisibility is one outcome. So we need to unpack unequal gender relations and examine assumptions that this is acceptable, that in the way that some humanitarian workers have done, for example. Ingrained ideas about women's dependency leads us to the case of the lost girls of Sudan and is indicative of the different treatment that male refugees receive versus women, and how a perception of women as dependent and reliant on families can eclipse them from view. Long-term dependency on humanitarian assistance has particular implications for women and the gender relations of refugee households. The stress on households and families in these situations is enormous as refugees try to cope over many years with restrictions to their employment and mobility while trying to survive on inadequate humanitarian handouts. Men's frustration, anger, loss of self-esteem increases women's exposure to domestic and sexual violence during long-term refugee situations. Women are also the targets of the resentment and violence of the host community when they leave a camp to gather firewood and other survival resources for themselves and their families. Even those in positions of authority who are meant to protect and support refugees have sometimes proven to be a grave danger for women and girls. As Elizabeth Ferris points out, when parents have little or no possibility to access education for their children and no income, then the only currency that girls have in long-term and hopeless refugee situations is their bodies. Aid workers, peacekeepers, and community leaders recognize the power they have over these refugees, and many have sexually exploited young refugee women and girls in camps around the world. I have recently argued in an article, and I'm going to end here, for a text on women in war and my sections on women and refugees, that the situation of refugee women is utterly disastrous in camps and in urban centers in exile. It's actually, I would argue, better for a woman to stay where she is in many, I would say most situations. What happens to refugee women is beyond the pale in terms of the experiences that they have to go through once they become refugees. Okay, thank you very much.